She had just left her little girl with Grandpa for the afternoon when her daughter shared something that horrified her. She immediately called the police. It was a cloudy afternoon, and a gentle breeze was blowing as Emily and her daughter Sophie walked hand in hand towards Mr. Thomas's house. Sophie curiously looked at the iron gates that surrounded the property. Sensing her daughter's anxiety, Emily started a conversation to ease her mind. "Sophie honey, I'm just leaving you with Grandpa Thomas for a few hours, okay? I need to sort some work stuff out, but I'll be back soon, alright?" "Okay, Mommy, but I've never stayed with Grandpa before," said the little girl, looking down. "I know, sweetheart, but remember I told you he's your daddy's dad. Even though we haven't been around him much since Daddy passed away, he's still our family, the only family we have," explained Emily. Sophie looked at her and nodded, trying to muster courage for this new experience. "Great, my love. I'm sure you two will get along. Take this chance to learn more about your dad, and remember, I'm just a call away if you need anything," Emily said, stroking her daughter's hair. "Okay, Mommy," Sophie replied with a smile, hugging her mum. Emily kissed her forehead and rang the doorbell. When Mr. Thomas opened the door, Emily was slightly taken aback by his worn look and stern face, although he tried to crack a timid smile. Looking straight at his granddaughter, he said, "Hello, Sophie. I've been looking forward to spending some time with you. We're going to have a lot of fun today." The little girl smiled shyly and waved goodbye to her mother, entering the house. Emily waved back, trying to hide her concern, and walked back to her car, her heart heavy. She had never been separated from her daughter for a minute before. Emily, a strong and determined 30-year-old woman with a life full of challenges and triumphs, had grown up in an orphanage and always valued the importance of family and believed in the transformative power of love. She faced financial hardships all the time, working odd jobs to support herself. At 24, she met Daniel, a dedicated and affectionate mechanic. They fell deeply in love, married soon after, and were expecting their first child, Sophie. However, Emily's life took a tragic turn when Daniel died in a car accident at his workshop just months after their baby's birth. The compensation wasn't enough to sustain him long term, and since then, Emily had dedicated herself to raising and educating Sophie alone, taking on both parental roles. Time passed, and the two formed an inseparable duo, facing life's challenges together and supporting each other. The tragedy strengthened their bond, making them true best friends. Mr. Thomas, Daniel's father, was a lonely and enigmatic man living on the outskirts of the city in a house surrounded by a vast garden. After his son's death, he isolated himself further, avoiding contact with his daughter-in-law and granddaughter in the initial years following the loss. Emily tried to maintain contact, but their attempts always seemed to collide with the pain and grief they shared, leading to increasingly rare visits until the connection between the two families virtually disappeared. Sophie grew up hearing stories about her father and, despite not knowing him, felt a deep affection for his memory. However, the figure of her paternal grandfather had always been a mystery to her. The few memories she had of him were of a man with a serious and distant appearance, who seemed to hide some secrets in his mysterious house. Thus, he was not the first option for Emily to leave her little girl with, but she was in desperate need of a job and had finally landed a job interview. With no one else to turn to, she had to accept that the grandfather was the only option to look after her for a few hours. As soon as Sophie sat on the couch in Mr. Thomas's house, a chill ran down her little body. The environment seemed strange, gloomy and lifeless. The dark-toned walls and dim lighting made it seem like each corner was hiding some secret. The 6-year-old girl felt fear and shrank back. Mr. Thomas, staring intently at his granddaughter, spoke with wide eyes and a somewhat forced smile. "Don't worry, my dear. I know my house might seem a bit different from what you're used to, but I promise it's a place full of interesting spots. For example, want to see my special room?" he said, taking the girl by the hand and leading her to that room. The little one tried to pull away, saying no, that it was okay to stay right there, but he continued guiding her down the hallway, insisting with a voice that sounded eerie to the little girl, "Come on, girl, let's have a little fun." Meanwhile, Emily hurried through the city streets with a heavy heart for having left her daughter with a grandfather she barely knew. Worry and anxiety were visible on her face, leaving her with a grim and restless expression. The day was cloudy and windy, causing dry leaves to fly across the ground, creating a scene that seemed to reflect the whirlwind of emotions the young mother was feeling. She arrived at the interview location, a small restaurant with a cozy and inviting atmosphere, took a deep breath, trying to compose herself and focus on the important task ahead, impressing. However, concern for Sophie continued to torment her. As she entered the establishment, the woman was greeted by the manager, a middle-aged man with a friendly smile and a professional demeanor. "Good morning, you must be Emily. We've been expecting you. Please, come with me," he said. The interview began with questions about her skills and previous experiences, but the poor woman had difficulty concentrating on her responses. Her hands trembled slightly, and she stumbled over her words, unable to hide the insecurity that dominated her. It was as though she had a bad premonition, and anguish seemed to have infiltrated every part of her being. The manager noticed her expression and asked, "It seems you're a bit nervous. Is everything okay?" She hesitated before answering, not wanting to appear weak or incapable, but knowing she couldn't hide what she was feeling. She explained, "I'm sorry, I'm a bit worried today. I left my daughter with her grandfather for the first time, and I'm uneasy because I don't know how she's doing." The man listened with understanding, and she could see a glimmer of empathy in his eyes. "I understand," he affirmed. "Being a mother is a huge responsibility, and it's normal to feel concern. But she must be fine. Let's continue the interview and try to keep focused, okay?" The interview proceeded, and Emily did her best to pay attention to the questions and respond clearly and assertively. However, the internal agitation continued to consume her, making her think she might blow this opportunity. As soon as the conversation ended, the young woman thanked him and left the restaurant, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. She wasn't sure if she had done well enough to secure a job. Nevertheless, she knew she needed to return to her little girl, hopefully with a job secured. Thus, determined to find employment, the mother spent the rest of the day traversing the city, distributing resumes and seeking opportunities. Fatigue and discouragement were evident with every step, but she couldn't afford to give up. Her life was tough, and the relentless search for a stable job was just another challenge to face in her daily struggle to support her daughter. Her sore feet and the dark circles under her eyes showed how difficult and exhausting the day had been. Emily felt the pressure of time passing, as she knew that every minute away from Sophie increased her restlessness and anxiety. As the afternoon progressed and shadows lengthened, she began to lose hope of finding a job that day. The poor woman had faced several interviews and handed out numerous resumes, but nothing seemed to materialize. Her frustration and despair accumulated as she thought about how she would get through another night of uncertainties and worries. Finally, as the sun set and the city lights began to turn on, the young woman decided it was time to return to Mr. Thomas's house and fetch her little girl. Although the day had been tough and seemingly fruitless, she couldn't allow herself to be beaten down, for she had a little creature depending on her. The journey back to her father-in-law's house was long and tortuous. Emily felt the weight of anxiety and uncertainty increasing on her shoulders. It was as if she knew something was wrong, as if she had a premonition. Meanwhile, inside Mr. Thomas's house, he and the little girl were coming out of the secret room where they had spent the entire afternoon together. He leaned down, looking discreetly into Sophia's eyes, and spoke with an enigmatic smile. "This is our little secret, okay? You can't tell anyone." At that moment, the mother knocked on the door, struggling to contain her agitation and nerves, which were at the surface. She was eagerly waiting to see her daughter again and learn how her time had been during their separation. Then Mr. Thomas opened the door, and she could see her little one at the back of the room, picking up her backpack. Something in the atmosphere of the house felt different, and the woman sensed a certain confusion upon realizing that her daughter was okay, but she couldn't help but notice an air of mystery and conspiracy between the two, which made her even more restless. As the little girl approached, Mr. Thomas said goodbye to Sophia, whispering softly in her ear, "Remember what I said, Sophia. You can't tell anyone, okay?" The little girl nodded in agreement, and the grandfather stepped back, allowing mother and daughter to reunite. Emily observed the exchange of words and gestures between them with growing concern. She didn't know exactly what had happened during her absence, but the air of secrecy and the man's insistence that the little girl not share something with anyone left her insecure and uncomfortable. The mother hugged Sophia tightly, relieved to see her well but at the same time uneasy about what might have happened between her and the grandfather. This feeling echoed in her mind, tormenting her with doubts about what exactly the secret was. Then the young woman smiled at her father-in-law, trying to hide her distress, and said, "Thank you for taking care of her today. It was a great help." Mr. Thomas returned the smile, looking directly at the little girl, and replied, "It was nothing. You can bring her anytime you need." The look he gave the girl made a shiver run down Emily's spine. They said goodbye and got into the car, starting the journey home. However, on the way, the mother tried to strike up a conversation with her daughter, curious to know what had happened during the afternoon. "So, what did you and Grandpa do today?" she asked, casting a worried look at her daughter through the rearview mirror. The little girl hesitated for a moment, avoiding her mother's gaze, and replied, "Oh, we played a bit." "Played with what?" she insisted, sensing that there was something Sophia didn't want to share. The little one bit her lip, appearing nervous, and let out a sentence that made the poor woman's heart race. "He showed me some things that hurt." Emily's face turned pale, and she struggled to keep calm while driving. That statement sounded alarming, making her fear the worst. Then, controlling her voice, although she was trembling inside, she asked cautiously, "What do you mean by things that hurt, Sophia?" I can't talk, Mommy." The girl turned to the other side and looked out the window. The woman tried to disguise her panic and pleaded, "Sophia, you need to tell me everything, my love." "What happened?" "He made me touch something," the little one said, "but not. Grandpa asked me not to talk." "Daughter, now," the mother was freaking out inside. "You can tell me anything, my love. What did you touch, and when he made you touch it?" I didn't like it, Mommy. I was scared, but he was by my side and told me it was just for me to see how it was." Emily felt her heart tighten and was already with tear-filled eyes. "What else happened, daughter? Please tell me." The girl shook her head with tears forming in her little eyes. "I can't, Mommy. He said it was our secret, and I couldn't tell anyone. I promised, Mommy." Hearing such words, the poor mother could no longer hold back the despair growing inside her. Tears welled up in her being, and she sobbed while trying to keep her attention on the road. Sophia's cry contagiously started crying too, not understanding what she had done wrong. "Mommy, did I do something?" asked the little girl between sobs. "No, my love, you haven't done anything wrong. Mommy is just worried about what happened, okay?" she replied, trying to calm her daughter, although she herself was in panic. As soon as they arrived home, the young woman picked up the phone, called the police with a trembling voice, and with bitter tears rolling down her face, she spoke, "Please, you need to help me. I left my daughter with her grandfather, and she said he did something to her, but she didn't want to tell me what it was. She said it's a secret, and he made her touch something. I don't know what to do. I'm desperate." Then, after the complaint was officially filed, Emily met with the police the next day, who would accompany her to Mr. Thomas's house with specific orders. The mother phoned the man, saying she needed to leave her daughter with him again for a few hours. He agreed with that sinister voice, making the woman almost cry on the other side of the line. Thus, they headed to his house. She tried to disguise her nervousness while handing Sophia over to her grandfather, pretending everything was fine. And she was leaving, however, as soon as she walked away from the house and the man closed the door, the agents began monitoring the audio from the microphone hidden in the girl's blouse. Emily's heart beat hard for having let her little girl stay alone with that man, but the police assured her that nothing would happen to her. The little one would only serve as bait to catch him in the act. Then, listening to the conversation between the two, which seemed normal until then, the mother almost fainted when Mr. Thomas said, "Let's go to our secret hideout." She started screaming and pleading for them to rescue her daughter from that monster. The police team acted immediately, invading the house in search of the grandfather and granddaughter. Emily ran along, apprehensive and afraid of what she might find. They entered the house carefully and without making noise so as not to scare the potential criminal, and followed the sound of voices to a closed room. "Here, Sophia," that was the man talking. Then, at that moment, the agents burst through the door, and everyone was shocked by what they saw. Instead of the gloomy and sordid scenario, they found a well-lit mechanical laboratory with various tools and parts scattered on the floor. In the center of the room, Mr. Thomas and the little girl were working together on a small mechanical invention. Mr. Thomas, startled, asked, "What happened? Can I help?" No one understood what was happening. The policemen entered and looked surprised, and they interrogated him. "What's going on here?" asked one of the agents firmly. The grandfather, quite confused, replied, "We're working on a small project of mine." "But what are you doing in my house? Emily, is that you?" That's when he saw her behind the men. The mother didn't know what to think or say. At the same time, she was deeply relieved. She didn't know what to say to her father-in-law and just stood petrified. Then the agents, realizing the poor woman's expression of astonishment and not wanting to embarrass her, just said they had received an anonymous complaint and were checking it out. "Complaint? I'm teaching Sophia about gadgets," said the grandfather. Emily, still with her heart racing, looked at Sophia and asked, "Is that true, my daughter? Is that what you guys do here?" The girl nodded her head and said, "Yes, Mommy. I'm helping Grandpa build a robot." "But you said it was a secret," the mother said, confused. "He said it was a secret because he thought you wouldn't like to see me handling the tools. They hurt, but Grandpa is always by my side, helping me so I don't get cut." It turns out that Mr. Thomas was actually a talented inventor, passionate about mechanics and robotics. He had taught everything he knew to his son, Daniel, and the two shared a deep love for their creations and discoveries. When Daniel died, the man was devastated. Since then, he had dedicated himself to honoring his son's memory by working to complete an invention that the two had designed together. It was a robotic assistant capable of helping people with their daily tasks and bringing joy to homes. The project had a special meaning for the man and Daniel, as it represented the union of their minds and hearts, besides being a way to help others, something both valued highly. Despite being a genius in his field, Mr. Thomas had always been very discreet about his abilities and knowledge. Few people knew about his inventions and the potential his creations had to revolutionize people's lives. Everyone in the room realized the great misunderstanding that had occurred. Emily approached her father-in-law with tear-filled eyes and begged for forgiveness for doubting him. He hugged her and said he understood her fears and concerns. Then, from that day on, mother and daughter began visiting the grandfather more frequently, learning about his passions and sharing precious moments as a family. The relationship between them strengthened, and Emily began to see Mr. Thomas as a paternal figure and emotional support in her life. After many months of hard work and dedication, Mr. Thomas's invention was finally ready. The robotic assistant proved to be revolutionary and extremely useful, attracting the attention of several companies interested in his project. He decided to patent the invention, securing the rights to his creation. Sales soared, and the old man became a wealthy man. With the financial situation stabilized and the desire to be even closer to his granddaughter Sophia and daughter-in-law Emily, he invited both to live in his house. Thus, grandfather, mother, and daughter lived as a true family, sharing moments of joy, learning, and growth. United by love and the memory left by Daniel, they moved forward, building a bright and happy future together. "You guys have no idea how much this means to me," he said, struggling to contain his emotion. With the necessary resources secured, they scheduled the exam. The news spread through the town, and the press was ready to cover the event, eager to discover the outcome of this intriguing story. On the appointed day, Joe and his friends headed to the clinic. They were nervous but full of hope. It was a moment to seek answers and finally end the uncertainty that haunted the man's life. As soon as Joe arrived at the clinic, he was approached by cameras, microphones, journalists asking if he thought it would be a girl or a boy, people shouting some that they were there for him, others that he was an aberration. Joe simply ignored everyone and entered. While waiting in the waiting room, that poor man felt a mix of emotions. He was grateful for this opportunity but also terrified of what might be revealed. His friends encouraged him, offering words of encouragement and affection. Time seemed to have stopped from so much impatience that the man was no longer able to bear the restlessness. Finally, after a few minutes that seemed like hours to him, the worker went to the exam room. The atmosphere there was tense, charged with expectation, fear of the unknown. Joe lay down on the bed, and his mind swirled with a bunch of thoughts. The doctor and his team prepared an ultrasound machine, ready to unravel the mystery surrounding Emmanuel's body. As the probe slid smoothly over his belly, the doctor looked at the screen of the monitor, attentive to the images that were revealed, and was completely silent, heightening attention. "What is it, doctor? Is it really a baby?" asked the man, trembling. The looks of the doctor and his team met, showing that even they were surprised and incredulous. "This is unbelievable," whispered the doctor, almost not believing what he saw. He exchanged a perplexed look with the other members as the scene unfolded before their eyes. "For the love of God, what's happening to me?" shouted Joe, almost freaking out. Then the doctor regained his composure and explained carefully. "Joe, the ultrasound revealed something extraordinary. You're not pregnant with a baby, but there is something inside you, and it looks human." Joe was stunned. His eyes widened as he tried to process the information. "What do you mean, human?" The team that was present said they would join together to pay for the exams. He would need to find out what that was. Everyone there was too curious to let that story go. Then, after a few days of exams and more exams, the definitive opinion finally came. The doctor took a deep breath, preparing to give the shocking news. "Joe, as we said, you're not pregnant." The poor man knelt and cried while his friends patted him on the back, celebrating. "Then what is it?" They wanted to know. It was what the world wanted to know. Then came the revelation. Joe is suffering from an extremely rare medical condition called fetus in fetu. It's when a fetus develops inside the body of a twin brother, like a type of parasite. The doctor's words echoed in the room, filling the atmosphere with silence and perplexity. The man struggled to assimilate the information, feeling a flood of emotions inside him. Twin brother, he thought, petrified. The doctor continued explaining how the accident Joe suffered from almost being run over months ago probably activated the fetal tissue that had been present in his abdomen since birth. His body mistakenly interpreted it as a kind of tumor and began to isolate the foreign body, leading to the uncontrolled growth of his belly and the symptoms of nausea, vomiting, dizziness, which are also similar to those of a pregnancy. Joe felt shocked by the revelation. His heart raced, the words buzzed in his mind. It was a whirlwind of sensations, a mix of disbelief, relief, and gratitude. He thought about the tumultuous journey he had faced up to that moment, the difficulties, and the humiliating exposure, and now this unexpected revelation. He finally found some clarity. He was grateful to finally understand what was happening inside his body, despite the fright and the mystery surrounding his condition. He felt deeply relieved not to be pregnant but instead carrying a part of his twin brother, as bizarre as that was. Joe, who had always seen himself alone since childhood and later also with the death of his parents, now felt something as if he had never truly been alone since inside his mother's womb, he had company. It's strange, we know, but let's understand what goes on in the head of that man who lived torturous days, right? Joe left the exam room with a mix of emotions, embracing life and finding the strength to move forward now that he understood a little more about himself. The surgery to remove the petrified fetus was scheduled and went smoothly. The farmer returned to being just one man. However, his life was now another because the extraordinary story of the man who was not pregnant echoed throughout the country, capturing the attention of the media and the population. Interviews were scheduled, television programs became interested in his story, and Emmanuel found himself at the center of attention and curiosity. The cameras were directed at him, microphones approached his mouth, and questions were asked. The field worker, still shaken by the revelations of his condition, tried to remain firm each time they touched on the subject. "How do you feel now after discovering the truth about your condition?" the reporters asked. Joe took a deep breath before answering, searching for the right words to express his complex range of emotions. "It's a relief and also gratitude for it not being anything serious, a bit of loneliness for knowing that I could have a brother to be with me today, but I'm okay, I'm fine," he said, moved. The interviews continued. Emmanuel shared his story frankly but also of struggle, hoping it could inspire others who were going through similar challenges. And with all this fame, the man earned a lot of money from the recognition of his unbelievable story. Joe took advantage of the money to invest in himself. He enrolled in vocational courses, seeking to acquire new skills and knowledge that would help him open new professional paths. He was not only overcoming adversities but also building a more prosperous and satisfying life. Over time, Joe began to reap the fruits of his new visibility and his efforts to improve his life. He acquired a small house, providing him with stability and a place to call home. The former farm worker also stayed close to his friends, those who supported him during his tumultuous journey. He shared a portion of the resources he obtained from his unexpected fame and helped him leave the farm as well. The camaraderie that united them strengthened even more. Joe understood that his path was just beginning. He was aware that his story had not only a happy ending but also a beginning full of possibilities and a bright future ahead. What do you think of this story? Do you think they acted right? Leave your comment below to know your opinion, it is very important to us. If you like this exciting story, help us by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Thank you very much for watching us and see you in the next story.